This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is an iconic, a multi-award-winning actor who's brought us dozens of unforgettable performances in a stellar career that spans almost 6 decades. He earned an Academy Award nomination and won a Golden Globe Award and a whole slew of prestigious film festival awards for Best Supporting Actor for his quiet, finely nuanced, painfully tender performance as David, the lover and caretaker of a life partner ravaged by AIDS in the groundbreaking film Longtime Companion. His other movie credits include Last Summer, 6 Degrees of Separation, Abnormal Attraction, The Crucible, Apt Pupil, X-Men, X2, Runaway Jury, Captors, Shortcuts, for which he and his fellow cast members won a Golden Globe Special Award and a Venice Film Festival Award for their work as an ensemble, and Displacement, for which he won a Hollywood Real Independent Film Festival Award for Best Supporting Actor. And of course, we all remember him from the cult classic horror film Willard, in which he bonded notoriously with a herd of rats. On television, you've seen him in hundreds of shows, including Harry and the Hendersons, Hunter, The Practice, Seinfeld, Knight Rider, Ghost Whisperer, Mozart in the Jungle, Designated Survivor, The Fosters, 1923, Bosch Legacy, and Glow and Darkness. And who can ever forget him as the villainous senator on Ozark and the wise judge on Lincoln Lawyer. And he was nominated for an Emmy Award for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series for his performance in Touched by an Angel. On the stage, he starred on Broadway in Tiger at the Gates, The Elephant Man, and the Glass Menagerie, as well as at the Lincoln Center in the cast of King Lear. And he portrayed Clarence in Richard III at the New York Shakespeare Festival. He's also starred on stage in The Skin of Our Teeth, The Little Foxes, A Life in the Theater, Love Letters, How I Learned to Drive, and Streamers, for which he won the Los Angeles Drama Critics Award. He received a second Los Angeles Drama Critics Award for his performance in the multi-award-winning play, The Normal Heart. Our guest is also an Emmy-nominated director for his work on the 2001 TV movie Off Season. In 2012, our guest received an honorary satellite award, and in 2018, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Action on Film International Film Festival. I'm delighted and honored to welcome the immensely talented, iconic actor, Bruce Davison, to our show. Mr. Davison, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Harvey. Wow, you did some research, I guess. That stuff sort of fades into the back.
Well, today it's fading into the front. Now, you attended Penn State as an art major and were originally planning to be a painter. What made you decide to become an actor?
Oh, well, I was with a friend one day there, and they said open calls as we were walking past the Creamery, which is a very famous place in Penn State. And there's a theater across the street, and they were all having open auditions for a play called Come Back Little Sheba. And I went in, and I was open, and I gave it a try, and I didn't get it, but I was so scared to death. I thought, wow, this has really set off something in me. I'm going to look into this. And I had a theater appreciation course that I took after that. And while I was in that, we each had to read a monologue that we were given about the theater. And there was one written by Arthur Miller, and I memorized it and read it. And as I read it and as it sunk into me, it just became part of me. And that's how I got into it. And years later, I got to work with Arthur Miller on The Crucible, the film. And I told him, he scared me to death. He'd be sitting back there with the cameras when I was leading the congregation, and I was terrified And I went up and he said, well, you know what you're doing as Paris, it's good. I didn't think of some of that stuff. And I said, well, you're the reason I'm an actor.
Now, when you were starting out as an actor, the famous director Robert Aldrich gave you an interesting piece of advice. He told you to be a character actor rather than a leading man because
Yes.
character actors always work. What did you think of that advice?
Well, at the time, I thought, no, I was actually kind of pissed because there was one part I was going to get, and things didn't happen, and it didn't come together for me, and another actor got it. It was a lead in the film, and I was huffing around while I was shooting Ozana's Raid with Bert Lancaster and Aldrich, and he said, he just said, "Kid, you don't want to be a leading man. You'll be a leading man. You'll be doing 6 pictures. You'll be washed up at 30." He said, "You're a good actor. You could be a supporting character. You could play the doctors and the lawyers and not the Indian chiefs, but all that stuff you could play, and you could raise a family in this town." And I thought at the time, well, that's not what I want, but that's what happened to me. And I'm raised a couple of families in this town.
Turned out to be good advice. Now, you've worked with some legendary stars over the years, and I'd like to ask you about a few of them, starting with Bert Lancaster. You co-starred with him in a wonderful Western called Ozana's Raid. What was
Yeah.
he like to work with?
Oh, he was just a delight. And he loved to be challenged. I've found this time and time again. The great actors are the ones that love you to challenge them. And so it steps up their game. I remember working with Dustin Hoffman, and he said, "Thank you for that, because that, upped my game, one lawyer against the other." But Bert was, he was great. He said, "Son, you have to take a little advice from me." He said, "Every time you give a performance, you give a performance for the sound man. You give another performance, man laying the marks over there. You certainly give a performance for all those girl extras. It comes to your close up, you've lost it." He said, "It's like foreplay or making love, whatever." He said, "It's like you can't try to do it all at once. You have to build it up." And he said, "Save it for the close up."
And you
And
did.
I used to watch him in scenes that I'm saying, "Oh, I'm acting him off the screen." And then I'd see the rushes, and it was like this little chihuahua bouncing around a bulldog, and you just watch the bulldog walk. So that was great advice from
That
Bert.
was that was really great advice. In 1974, you co-starred with Lucille Ball in the movie Mame. You played
Yeah.
the older Patrick. I
Mhm.
know our viewers would love to hear some of your memories about your time working with Lucy.
Well, I got to know Lucy when I first came to Hollywood through Desi Jr., who I became friends with. And when I got the part, she says, "Desi says you're a good actor, so you better be." Lucy was an 8-year-old vulnerable truck driver. She was such a dichotomy of a human being. She could run a studio. She could start Hollywood. She could be tough as nails and the fragilest little girl at the same time. It was amazing to see that in a human being, because she was just wonderful to work with. And and then once again, she's an actor who would challenge me. She was very insecure in the part because she thought she was too old and it was getting too late for her to do that. But she barreled in there, full guns a-blazing. A scene with her that started like 8 months after we shot. They gotten really delayed, and all of the fox chasing stuff and everything. And I came on as the older Patrick. And Robert Preston has died, and I come up to her and I say, "I love you, Andy Mame," and hugged her. And that was the scene. So I came up from the bottom of the steps, action, went to her, hugged her. "I love you, Andy Mame," walked away. The director said, "Cut." "Okay, that's a print." She said, "No, I didn't believe it. Do it again." And I went, "Oh no, this is going to be tough." So I went down, and everything just boiled up inside me. And I came up to her And I put my arms around her and said, I love you, Annie Mae. Ooh, went out of it. And in the background, as I walked away, I heard, I knew you had it in you. And that was Lucy.
What an icon she was. Now you were directed by Henry Fonda in the Cane Mutiny Court Martial.
Yes.
What was Mr. Fonda like as a director?
Oh, well, he was wonderful. It was the Cane Mutiny Court Martial, which is a play that he had done on Broadway, playing Greenfield. And more than anything, he was an artist. He was a very dedicated sketcher and painter, and he became really good at his detail. And it was really wonderful. And I had given it up after college. I had done a few things. He said, well, let me see some of your art sometime. So I brought some in and showed it to him. He said, this is good. Why'd you stop? And I said, well, I knew I could play Rembrandt, but I could never be Rembrandt. And that stopped me. And he said, well, that's what's wrong with your acting. It's not about getting the results. It's about the journey. It's about doing the journey. It's about enjoying the work. I can paint a windowsill that's all cracked, and I can be painting that for months until Shirley scraped it and I had to paint something else. It's the joy of doing it. That's what's important. Years later, I met Jane Fonda at an event, and I told her that story, and she said, why didn't you tell that to me?
He never told her that about her acting?
No, I said, because I was a schmuck actor, and I was just one guy on the Cane Mutiny Court Martial, and he could talk like that, like he could curse with a bunch of guys around, but he couldn't tell his daughter. And I never really understood it as well until now, when I have a 17, 18-year-old daughter who it's like the delicacy of, I think Hemingway say, it's like the dust on the wings of a butterfly. You blow too hard and you're going to destroy it. And with those you love, with those you care about, it's very, very hard. And now I understand that, because my daughter's becoming an actress too.
Now, you co-starred with Jessica Tandy in the Glass Menagerie on Broadway. What was she like to work with?
Well, both her and Hume was in the Cane Mutiny Court Martial. Yeah, Hume and Jessica were like the Lunts of Broadway, and they were a wonderful team together. They always were. And working with Jessica, the person that helped me the most during that course of time was Hume. And it was a difficult time for me. My mother was dying, and I was in Philadelphia, and that was in Philadelphia, and I was shooting. I was on stage in New York doing the Glass Menagerie, so I was out of it. I couldn't get in touch with anything. I was just in free fall. And Hume said, "Well, you're lucky. You don't have to do anything in this play. All you have to do is find your light." Stand there and say the words. It's all you have to do. The words will take care of it. You don't have to put anything into it. I didn't go to the moon. I went much further. For time is the longest distance between two places. That's the wonderful thing about Tennessee's writing in that play. The words are so evocative, so capturing of emotion, that you don't need to do anything as the narrator. You just have to stand there and tell the story.
That's just remarkable. Now, one of my very favorite of your films, you co-starred with Loretta Young in her very last movie, Lady in the Corner. Did you enjoy working with her?
Oh my God, that was wonderful. Well, that's very interesting that you bring up Loretta, because when I first came to town, I was dating this girl, Maggie, and she said, "You got to come home with me and meet my father. I'm scared to have dinner with him." And I drove up to this big country house, and went in, and there this man, a hawkish man in white hair, sitting at the end of the table. And we started talking about films, and he says, I hate that word. It's like something sliming your hands. Nobody makes a motion picture anymore. And I'm thinking, Maggie's last name is Wellman. I'm sitting with William A. Wellman, the founder of Hollywood, the man who made everything, and he became a mentor to me. And this was one of the great founding fathers, and he had shot in Call of the Wild with Clark Gable and Loretta up in the. He said, well, I was shooting up there, and Clark was so in love with Loretta, he couldn't remember his lines, so I got all her stuff done first and sent her away. And then she came to visit the set 9 months later with a little baby with the biggest ears you've ever seen. So while I was working with Loretta, I said, William Wellman was telling me stories about you falling in love. And she says, I fell in love with all my leading men. And she was older by that time, and I said, and I also heard from a story about Robert Mitchum, and you had a jar on the set that every time somebody used foul language and they had to do that. And he said, Loretta, here's $10, go yourself. He said, no, it wasn't that. That's not true. It was taking the Lord's name in vain. That's what the jar was for. I said, okay, well, thank you for clearing that up.
We actually had William Wellman Jr. on our show.
Oh, yes, Bill Jr. Oh, well, I have a story that ends with him that begins with that. Wellman wrote a book, an autobiography that was never published, but it's called Growing Old Disgracefully. And there's only like 6 copies, and Maggie gave me one. And in it, he talks about shooting a movie called Blood Alley, and he's with it's shooting with Wayne and John Wayne. And I'm sorry, these are long stories. I guess it's all right to go into. This is like a shaggy dog tale leading up to Bill Wellman Jr. But I was talking to Wellman, and this is written down in a piece about how he was shooting, and he was on the prow of the ship looking down, and John Wayne and Lauren Bacall were setting up a 2-shot down below, and he said Bogey showed up, and he looked like he'd been drinking with Wayne. And I said, wow. So, and he said, she's doing great, Betty's doing great. He said, well, that's good. This is her first picture without me. I just checking on her, making sure she's doing okay. He says, yeah, Wayne loves her. I mean, this is really going good. She can hold her own against him. She doesn't take any guff. He said, that's good. Like I say, it's a first picture without me, and I got cancer, Bill. I don't know how to tell her. And Wellman they held each other, and they were hugging up there. And Wellman wrote this all down in his book, in 2 or 3 pages. And he says, yes, the tears will come, but only when he's asleep. And Betty looked up at the 2 of them hugging up there, and she waved, and she said, thanks for getting his not letting him get his lip fixed, and because he had nerve damage. And he said, that's why he talked like that. And he said, that's special. Nobody else has that. That's good. And she said, and tell him how often you watch his movie. So anyway, this was 30 years before I'm sitting with Robert Altman and Lauren Bacall at a table at a thing for Jack Lemmon. I said, Betty, do you remember Bill Wellman? She said, oh man. He says he was a man's man. Him and Bogey, they were men's men, And I said, do you remember Blood Alley? You were shooting Blood Alley. She said, yes. We were on the deck there. We waved up, and there were hugging each other. That's before we knew he was sick. And I went, whoa, I don't know how I got here, but I said, I have something written down I need to send to you. And it was this section of his book. And it was back in the days of faxing, and I faxed it to her. And I didn't hear from her. But I'd see her and she'd wave across events that like the Golden Globes and stuff. And then I got a call, and it was from her son. And he said, "Hi, I hear you have a story about my dad and Bill Wellman. Would you tell it to me?" And I said, "I don't know how I got on this ship. I don't know how I got on the deck of this ship, but I don't belong here. You call Bill Jr. He's writing a book now about his dad. And you call Bill and you ask him to send that to you."
Now, you've appeared with Ian McKellen in 4 different movies: 6 Degrees of Separation, Apt Pupil, X-Men, and X2. You must have a very good working relationship with him.
Oh, well, I love Ian. He's the best. Don't say, darling. Oh, just as wonderful to see you again. The first time I met Ian McKellen, I was on Broadway. I think it was 84, because they were doing Amadeus. They were just opening up. And I was a good friend of Amy Irving, who was before she married Stephen. And she was doing the play with Ian, and I got a little present, and in between shows, matinee and the evening performance, I went and I knocked on the stage door, and Ian in his underwear opened the door, and he said, "Yes." And I was in shock. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just, Mr. McKellen, I just wanted to leave this at the stage manager's office for Amy Irving." And he looked at me and said, "Where's my present?"
That's fabulous.
I'll get you next one, but that's when I first met Ian. But he's the most generous person.
Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, you became a household name because of the classic horror film Willard, and we all noticed your portrait above the fireplace in the 2003 remake of Willard. What did you think of the 2003 version?
Well, I didn't see it. I have a very difficult time even watching myself, but I never got to see it. But I worked with the producers years later in a TV series. One of the producers, anyway, in a Chloe Sevigny TV series, and that we shot in Pittsburgh. So, but I didn't get to see that performance. No.
Well, I saw it and I liked the original. I hate to tell you that, but I really preferred the original. But I loved seeing that picture of you above the fireplace.
Yeah. Well, Crispin Glover is a brilliant actor. I think he is. But in Willard, I think you need somebody softer and more accessible in order to carry all the darkness.
Yes.
That's what made the first one work. Anyway.
Now, you played Jareth on Star Trek Voyager, and you played Minos on Star Trek Enterprise, which makes you extremely popular for the millions of Trekkies out there. Do you get a lot of fan mail from Star Trek fans?
Well, some, it's occasionally. I'm sort of spread so far out and everything that I think the most important thing I got is, once again, being a character actor. And my first agent said, if you're a character actor, people won't know your name, but you can walk into any bar in the world and somebody will buy you a drink. And it's kind of like that. I don't drink, but it's like that. People know you. And I did a documentary about that with about 12 other actors, and it was called "Who Is That Guy in That Thing?"
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. And we just had John Rubinstein on the show, and he said exactly the same thing.
Yes. Well, John, I've known since, theater days, when we were back together doing theater in New York. And he's always been capable of everything. I mean, I always envied him so much, with his singing voice and all. But I remember watching him in Children of a Lesser God, and I remember watching John, and the music would play and he'd suddenly start to cry. And I thought, God, how do you do that, John? How do you do that? He says, it's my father's record.
Yeah, he's just an amazing actor. And like you guys can do anything. Everybody recognizes you, but you can still live a reasonable life where you're not being constantly hounded. It's really the perfect way to be a journeyman actor.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you about one of my all-time favorite movies, which you starred in 1978. It's called Summer of My German Soldier.
Yes.
You play a German prisoner of war in an American POW camp in Georgia who falls in love with a lonely Jewish American girl played by Christy McNichol. That was a very emotionally powerful film with a strong message about the impact of hate and the power of love. Was making that movie one of the highlights of your career?
Well, it certainly was. And Christy was just brilliant. And Esther Roll, I think, won an Emmy for that performance in that as well. And it was. And the thing there was something that happened in that film that echoes in my head to this day. And it was this little Jewish girl helps a German soldier and keeps him in her dollhouse and feeds him and takes care of him, and they form this wonderful relationship. He runs off, he's killed, and she becomes this pariah in this hick southern town. And some lady looks at her and she says, "Jew Nazi." She calls that to Christy. And my God, I mean, the juxtaposition of that and all the, it just sums up all the hatred in the world to me, and how people are so overwhelmed with what happens to a human being when one human being meets another. And I've spent time in Israel. I've spent time all through the Mideast and all of the countries. And you get to a dinner table and you sit down with a family and everybody's the same and they all care about the same things mostly. They may pray to a different God. They may, have certain different rituals, but basically we're all in the same soup.
And that movie really exemplifies that message. And another fascinating movie you made was The Wave in 1981.
Yes.
It was based on the true story of a high school teacher who conducted an experiment to explain to his students how the German population could accept the actions of the Nazi regime. You played the high school teacher. The film won an Emmy, a Peabody Award, and a Young Artist Award for Best Television Special for a family audience. Does that movie stand out as one of your favorites as well?
Very much so. And I wish it would be played now, because it really is about cult. And it's really about how, you could, if you end up following blindly without knowledge and a character, it just leads to the oblivion that World War II led to. And it's so timely now, especially now, not to get too heavy into politics, but it does matter now before the election.
And that's why I'm mentioning these movies. It's hard when you go through your body of work to pick out my favorites, because we would be here all day, but I'm trying to pick out the ones that I think resonate so much with what's happening in the world today, which leads me, of course, to Longtime Companion.
Yeah.
It was such a significant movie for all of us in the gay community because it showed the world the battle that we were all fighting against the AIDS epidemic. Did you understand at the time you were making that film the immense social significance that film would have?
No, I didn't. I did not realize how large it could get. But I was doing a play at the time, the Cocktail Hour in New York, and my ex-wife had worked with Norman Renee and Craig Lucas, and I had been introduced to them. And I went and I read their script and I auditioned for the part. And I brought the script to the theater. It was Holland Taylor was playing my sister in it, and I read it to her, and I just remember the tears running down, ruining her blouse as she read that let go scene in it. And I just knew, I have to do this. This is about, and I have a scene where I'm getting my lover to let go, to just you can let go now, you can die, you can give it up. And it just resonated so much with me because, going back to Glass Menagerie, I went through that scene with my mother. I think we all do at some time or another. That's why it had such impact. But the film was just shot as a public as a PBS special that we never even thought was going to get on the air. So after we did it, it was, it became something else. And it just caught the crashing wave at the time in 1989, 1990, when it was in the middle of this horrendous time.
It was a horrible time. The movie was incredibly important to our community because you articulated how we were all feeling and what we wanted to say to the world. Actually, when I think about it, Mr. Davison, you've been very strongly connected with movies and shows about AIDS because in addition to Longtime Companion, you appeared as a doctor in the 1995 movie The Cure, and you starred in the highly acclaimed play The Normal Heart. Yes. And you were also in It's My Party, directed by Randall Kleiser, who was on our show last year. And a lot of people may not know that you have served as a spokesperson for a number of AIDS-related organizations. And I just want to take this opportunity on our show to thank you, Mr. Davison, for the important contribution you've made, not only to supporting AIDS awareness, but for creating an atmosphere of understanding and compassion towards members of the LGBTQ community. Thank you, Bruce.
Well, thank you, Harvey, for saying that. It was very interesting because I was nominated in 1991, I think it was. And I remember my co-star, I was doing Harry and the Hendersons, a TV series, and my co-star who was playing Harry had AIDS. And he was in the hospital, and I called up. I said, what's going on? He says, I'm not going to be making it back. And I went in to him and I said, I am going crazy. I don't know what to do. I'm a straight man doing this play, and there are people in wheelchairs in front sobbing away. And I feel so guilty having all of these accolades and these rubber chicken dinners and everything going through the Academy Awards. And he just put his finger on my chest and he says, it's your job to tell my story. It's your job. And the next year when Tom Hanks, I was having a conversation with him when he was nominated for Philadelphia. It was at the Golden Globes or something. And I told him that story. And he just was so relieved to feel the guilt of carrying as an actor. So often, we live inside a character, but it's like the prisoner's guard who gets to go home at night. He doesn't have to stay and live within the prison of that life. And it certainly made a difference to me, and it always reverts back to that same thing. You get to speak for other people, and that somehow brings you together in harmony with the rest of the human race. That's your job.
Well, besides dealing with AIDS, when I look at your career, you've been in a number of other movies that have brought attention to important social issues. I'll give you some examples. Short Eyes was about child molestation. French Quarter was about prostitution. Tomorrow's Child dealt with test tube babies. The Ladies Club dealt with victims of rape seeking justice. Live from Death Row is about capital punishment. After Jimmy is about teen suicide. I could go on and on. My question to you is, do you look for projects that have a social justice component to them?
Well, being a character actor, I sort of go where I'm kicked lots of times. But if I have the opportunity to work within something that I feel strongly about, and I get that opportunity, that's just that's the most wonderful part about being an actor. And that's the real joy. It's not the money, because character actors don't make a lot of money, but at the same time, they get to be characters that I can sort of shift around anywhere. And if I have the opportunity to be part of a story that tells something. Now, in all of those films you mentioned, for the most part, I'm not the lead in those, but I get to be part of that story. I get to tell the story in a way, and sometimes in a villainous way, sometimes in a way where you're the victim, or the doctor in the other. But
Well, I think that it really creates quite a body of work that you can be incredibly proud of. And here's another thing. You've portrayed a number of real people throughout your career. In 1978, you played Dean Torrance from the pop duo Jan and Dean in a TV movie called Dead Man's Curve. You also played the Puritan minister Samuel Parris in The Crucible, and Secretary of State William H. Seward in Saving Lincoln, and the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer's father in the 2002 movie Dahmer. When you're portraying a real person, what kind of preparation and research do you do?
Well, first of all, it makes a big difference if the person is someone that people know that lived in their time zone. I mean, playing Seward was something that people don't remember how he spoke or how he talked unless what they hear, like Lincoln or something had a high voice. So, but when I'm playing people like Dean Torrance and Jan and Dean, he's a live person, and I was cast because I looked so much like Dean, and we're still friends over the years. I got to know him and Jan after we had done that film back in the 70s, and we we recorded another song years later from some schlocky horror movie that I did, called Shrewd Awakening, was the song we sang. But that makes it different. That's quite different than playing a character that exists now. There are a number of them, but as I get older, you sort of outgrow certain characters that you would have loved to have played.
Well, throughout your very long and impressive career, you've managed to avoid being typecast. Over the years, you've played really nice, good guys, really evil guys, creepy weirdos, priests, politicians, everything in between. You've played gay, you've played straight. How have you managed to avoid being pigeonholed into playing one specific type of character?
Well, that's not really true. Actually, you are typecast every time you do something successful, and then you'll get 20 of those. Right now, I'm in the evil senator Republican phase of my life, or, the old codger, the old guy, the old cowboy coming along. But they come from films that you've done that somebody sees the tape and they say, yeah, give me that guy. Because usually when you're a character actor, you're the bishop or the pawn or the knight that's put in there to protect the king, who's the star, or to serve that purpose. So we were in 1923. I was working with a young boy from South Africa who played my son, who was the lover, and at the end of the first season, he's thrown overboard into the ocean by the star. And he said to me one time, he says, well, maybe I lived and they'll rescue me. And I said, no, no, man, we're the mechanicals in this. We're those mechanical guys. We're there to serve the hero and the young heroine being separated. That's our job. That's what we're here to do. You're here to get thrown overboard, and I'll just go die somewhere.
That being a character actor, that's what accounts for the longevity you've had in your career as an actor.
Yeah. Well, it has, because I love acting, And, if I have an opportunity, I mostly love independent films. There's one now, and any kind of genre. I just did a horror film called Suitable Flesh, and there's a great part I have in that. But once again, it's being the character actor in a story being told. And another one, Beau Bridges has just done one that'll be coming out soon called Camera, and I'm his buddy in the town and stuff. And it's great to be able to be in a position to shift in and out. And also, you don't carry the film. The weight of the film is not on you necessarily. But so every once in a while, it's really going with the flow of the river. You jump in a river and you find what you can stay on to stay afloat. And that's really what being a character actor is. You're there till your next job. We're always out of work.
Well, you're not out of work for very long.
Well, it certainly feels that way. And sometimes I am, I must tell you. And then boom, 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 boom. 3 or 4 things will happen in the same day. And then you'll go 6 months. And it's always like that.
I remember you co-starring in Grace of My Heart opposite Ileana Douglas. She was on our show a few weeks ago, and she referred to the movie as one of the last women's pictures. Do you think there is such a thing as a woman's picture anymore these days?
I don't know. I've been watching a lot of British television because of the strike and everything. And it seems to me that all the detective shows and everything are all run by women. It's not totally women, but it's, the lead is the woman character. And it's certainly, there was one I was watching, Happy Valley, which is a wonderful thing. And I think it was a sequel to the one that Kate Winslet did in America afterwards. But I think it's opening up in a whole, finally we're all just coming together. We're all just human beings that find their way into stories. Sometimes we're the victims, sometimes we're the villains, sometimes we're the lead, and sometimes we're the milkman or the milkmaid. But the way the world has shifted now, especially since a lot of the Me Too movement and stuff, is that there's an equality that grows. So as the equality grows, when I first started, there were no women on the set, and now it's half women that are gaffers, and not just the makeup artists and people, but camera women and men and people building the sets. All of that. It's the world has changed, and for the better.
For the better.
And I think instead of just women's movies, that there are women in movies that are equal to the men in it, whether they be the writers, whether they be the producers, whether they be the stars or not. It's shifted, and it may not be shifted into everybody's speed of wanting to get there, and race as well. But it's coming.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I think it's a great thing to see all this diversity and equality. Now, in addition to being a mega talented actor, you're also a very gifted director, Mr. Davison. Most notably, you directed 2 TV movies, Bigfoot and Off Season, which earned you an Emmy Award nomination and featured Hume Cronyn in his very last role. When I think of you as a director, is there any director you've worked with that you're channeling as a role model for yourself?
No, I don't think I'm channeling all of them. And it could be a bit here, a bit there, or anything else. But I think I've loved the actors that became directors, because they know sort of how delicate that is. It's like I said before about the Hemingway quote about F. Scott Fitzgerald, his talent was like the dust on the wings of a butterfly. And an actor is like that too. There's nobody more naked than the actor getting out there. So yeah, either physically or you know, bearing his spirit, his soul, his vulnerability, her vulnerability. And it's just a moment to moment process. Also, the best actors are the ones that aren't the canned actors that know the lines and say the thing and do the same thing every time. They're the ones that are on free fall. And lots of times, I remember doing a scene with John Cassavetes and another actor, and we had this whole long take, and we were doing 30 takes, and Cassavetes was blowing every line, and he was just going nuts. And finally, you look at the film, and we don't exist. All you watch is John Cassavetes, because he's in the moment. He's in that moment, and that's where he is. He's jumped off the diving board, and he's just in free fall. And you know, less in sitcoms and stuff, but more so in the great films and the great actors. They have to create the illusion of the first time, and that's hard. And it's hard to remember your lines sometimes when you're doing that, or so many other things. That's why for me, again, Shakespeare is always the most difficult, because to do that within Shakespeare is really tough. And Shakespeare's language helps you and it guides you in that way. But eventually you got to just know those words and let go. And you got to know them like the back of your spine. And, you know, often I did strive to yield the ghost, but still the envious flood stopped in my soul and would not. Well, I don't want to go on. But, you know, you got to let it carry you to where it's taking you sometimes.
You are a marvel. When you look back at your career, Mr. Davison, which spans more than 50 years, is there one particular experience that stands out as being the most personally satisfying?
I'd say Longtime Companion. I'd say the let go scene in Longtime Companion. And that was very interesting because Norman Renee, the director, was sick and nobody knew it. And that was kept a secret between him and Craig. And working in that scene, he just finally said, okay, you've done everything I've told you now. This isn't about you. This isn't about how you feel. This is about getting him to let go. And suddenly we you know, it's 3 a.m. and you're setting up for 5 hours or trying to pay off the woman to tell her it's a murder mystery. It's not about AIDS. You keep the apartment to shoot in and get another $500 to pay this person off and all of that. And then you get to the moment and it's 30 seconds. But you've got to just free fall through those 30 seconds. And you don't know how it's going to go. And it may be how Mark Lamos breathes or how he feels. But the director's saying to him, you've done all the physical work. Listen to what he says and do what he tells you to do. And suddenly, and I said to Norman, I said, it's a 2-shot. Don't cut away. Don't let the audience escape this 2-shot, because this isn't about me and this isn't about him. This is about this. This is about getting him to let go in this scene. Don't let the audience off the hook. Now, I can go back to William Wellman and remember that he did Oxbow Incident, and I think he broke Daryl Zanuck's jaw over the fact that they wanted a close-up of Henry Fonda reading the letter, and he just wanted the letter to be the impact, and he had cowboy hats blocking Fonda's face, and all you saw was his lips reading the letter. He says it's not about Fonda and it's not about the tears, it's about the letter. And you find out what that essence is, and that's important.
You know, when Sam Peckinpah was asked how he went about choosing the roles he played, he said, I just go where I'm kicked. Have you have you had a strategy for your career over the years, or do you just go where you're kicked?
My strategy is Sam Peckinpah's quote, which I remember hearing when I was just right after the Wild Bunch, and I thought, yep, that's it. You go where you're kicked, because this business. Who is Goldman, who wrote the book, said the famous quote. He said, "Nobody knows anything. That's the most important thing you must know about this business. Nobody knows anything, or there'd be a hit after hit after hit." And there can be plastic hits like all the superhero movies, but even they disintegrate if it's not a spontaneous new idea. The thing that was so exciting about X-Men 1 was it was brand new. It was a new idea, and it wasn't about special effects. It was about these characters and people that cared. I mean, even in the second one, one kid's mother says to him, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" It's always what happens, what's real, what humanity can cling to in a moment and say, yeah, that's about me. That's me.
Do you have any interest in sitting down and writing a memoir?
I started to. I have stories, some of them which I've been sharing with you today, but I have the great Barbara Rush story. She gave me my title, which is I'm being woken up out of a sound sleep and shaking me, and it's a kid saying, "We're ready, Bruce, we're ready." And I'm ready for what? I don't know where I am. Oh, I'm in the airport. It's 3 a.m. I'm walking along corridor, and suddenly I'm on an aisle and I'm shooting Randall Kleiser's little independent film, and Barbara Rush is putting her own makeup on, and we're on the elevator boat, and I remember, okay, she has all the lines. I just say that at the end, and I turn to her and I say, "Barbara, do you ever get confused about what's real and what's not?" And she says, "Darling, it's only real when they say action."
Oh, that's a great title.
Yeah.
So are you going to do it?
Hopefully get to it. Between the paintings, we try to get to everything, but
Okay, I want you to promise me when that book comes out that you'll come back on our show to promote it.
Absolutely, you bet.
I would love that. Well, I have only one more question for you, Mr. Davison, and it's a question that's been rattling around in my mind ever since I saw you in Willard. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here goes. How long did it take you to get a girl to kiss you after you kissed that rat?
In film, probably 15 to 20 years. And then I had to be a married dad to kiss my wife. But, after I kissed that rat, that was it, man. That was the end of it.
Well, I want to tell you something. I know that the last thing your mother ever said to you was, "Do good work."
Oh.
So, Mr. Davison, I hope you feel immense satisfaction in knowing that you have indeed, for almost 60 years, done extremely good work. It's been an enormous pleasure meeting you and having this opportunity to talk about your amazing life and career. Thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
Oh, thank you, Harvey. It means a lot to me too.
Our guest has been the iconic actor Bruce Davison. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.